Good morning, folks. It is Tuesday, January 27th. It is 9:01 a.m. This is the Colorado Geologic Storage Stewardship Enterprise Board. Read that appropriately so that I got all those names right. We are going to start with a roll call of the board members. And our hearings manager is Hearings Manager Elias Thomas. He keeps us straight and narrow. So, Mr. Thomas, talk to me.
Morning. I will take the roll call. We are still waiting on one board member who we do anticipate attending. I will be reaching out to board member Littlefield shortly. So, Mr. Chair, do you want me to just to take the roll at the
Um,
moment anyway, or would you like to give me a quick break to see if I
Why
can?
don't why don't we take just a quick break and see if we can
Oh,
look how that happens. It's all perfect. Good morning, Board Member Littlefield. Good to have you with us. I was just indicating we're going to take a roll call, so let's do that.
thank you, board member Littlefield, board member Murphy,
Here.
board member Randall,
Here.
board member Robbins,
Here.
and board member Ross.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have all five board members present.
Good morning, Board. Great to be with you. We've met once in public and once in an executive session. It might help our stakeholders, there's a few, to get a sense of who we are. So maybe I'll walk around the room and allow everybody to introduce themselves. I'm Jeff Robbins. I am the chair of the Geologic Storage Stewardship Enterprise Board, GSSEB. I also serve as chair of the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, and that chairmanship allows me to be chair of this. I have been with the commission for 7.5, 7 years. Oh my gosh. And before that, I practiced private law in the state of Colorado. I'm based out of Durango, and I've enjoyed all the good work we've done for the state. So that's me. Board Member Littlefield, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anna Littlefield, and I am a geologist by training. I've worked in the energy industry for um, 13 years now and currently serve as the low carbon energy program manager at the Colorado School of Mines, where I also am a geochemistry PhD student, hopefully finishing this year.
Good luck with that. Board Member Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my fellow board members. My name is Julie Murphy. I'm currently the Director of Colorado's Energy and Carbon Management Commission, and in serving in that role, I have the opportunity to also serve on this board, which is a terrific bonus, in my opinion. That wasn't something that I got to do when I started this job, so again, it's a bonus. I'm a lawyer by training, like so many, and I've been working in or for the Energy and Carbon Management, formerly known as Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, Department of Natural Resource, or Attorney General's office on energy mining and other issues since, roughly 2012. So I'm getting a little long in the tooth, I guess is the point of that comment.
It's been a minute.
It's been
Board
a
Member Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, all. I'm Bob Randall. I am an attorney with the law firm Kaplan Kirsch LLP based in Denver. I'm in our energy and environmental practice area. Before joining the firm, I was at the Department of Natural Resources for about a decade. So like Julie, I spent some time in public service, started with the state in 2007, and came over here in 2019. So I am really pleased to be here and good to see you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Randall. Board Member Ross.
Morning. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, board members. My name is Ashley Ross. I've been dedicated to decarbonization, including carbon capture and storage, for over 2 decades now, working with NCCS at MIT academically, and then with big energy companies out of Houston and with a startup here in Colorado. Then went to the Department of Energy, where I was Deputy Director of Carbon Management Technology, so looking after the CCUS funding portfolio across all the different technologies. So I'm really pleased to be a part of this board now. I'm now a Chief Commercial Officer of a different climate technology company kind of adjacent to CCS. And so really grateful for this opportunity to put this expertise to benefit for the state of Colorado.
Great to have you with us, Board Member Ross. Great. Appreciate all the welcomes and the introductions from our board members. This is our first meeting in which we are supposed to take action. And so we've got, well, first off, let me just note for the record that we didn't have anybody sign up for public comment. We did receive 2 written public comments relative to the white paper that our ECMC staff put together. And we've reviewed those written comments, and they will help us with our deliberations today. We have before us, I think, 3 action items, and let me just sort of chart the course of the day for us. One is a board deliberations on the white paper and on whether and to what extent we should set a geologic stewardship fee. Second is board deliberations on whether to impose orphan geologic storage fee. So that's a fee for potential orphan geologic storage wells. And then board deliberations on next meeting, as well as sort of meeting cadence. Before we roll into that, I did want to inform my fellow board members that the white paper informs us that we have the ability to adopt rules as necessary or to adopt procedures for conducting board business. That's from the implementing statute that created us. Having said that, I don't believe it's necessary for us to consider the adoption of rules or procedures to govern how we're going to act together. I think that the things that are before us today can be done via motions and seconds, and that's in accordance with just sort of General Roberts Rules of Order. But I did want to inform ourselves that that is an available opportunity for us. And so I'm catching you off guard, but I just wanted to make sure that other folks felt comfortable that we can probably go about the 3 action items today without the necessity of formalizing rules or procedures. Does anyone have concerns about that approach or thoughts?
I'll just weigh in and say I don't have any concerns, Mr. Chair. That makes sense to me. We are a small body with a somewhat limited scope, and we would spend more time adopting procedural rules likely than we would maybe deliberating on the task at hand. So I support your recommendation that we proceed with Robert's Rules of Order, and if ever there's a need to address procedures, maybe we could do that on the fly.
Okay. Everybody else cool with that? I'm seeing nodding of heads in the up and down fashion, so we will proceed that way. With all due haste, let's jump into board deliberations on the white paper and the geologic storage fee. And for the folks that are listening in, we received from our subject matter experts a 45-page white paper or 45-page-ish, I can't remember exactly, that really sort of walk through the concept of geologic storage fees. It walked through the other states that have done something akin to this, North Dakota, Wyoming, Louisiana. And just to sort of set the record, the geologic storage fee is a fee imposed on carbon sequester and utilization operators on a per ton basis, and it's to allow the state to obtain the fee and put it in trust, and then use that fee for long-term storage after the sequestration has been accomplished and it's generally in the ground and good to go. So let me open it up to my fellow commissioners for deliberations on the idea of a geologic stewardship fee and what that number ought to look like. Do any of our scientists want to weigh in, or any of our lawyers want to weigh in?
Chair.
Yep.
I know we said we're in deliberations, but is it okay to ask staff a couple of clarifying questions as we kind of step into this?
Absolutely. That's a brilliant idea. I should have thought of it myself, but didn't. Yeah, but to do that, we're going to need to elevate Mr. Seeley. Um, there he is. Look at that. He's even got a coat on.
Yep.
Good morning, Mr. Seeley.
Morning, board members. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for being here. And I have two somewhat disparate questions. So I think I'll start with the more focused one. And in looking through the different fees in the white paper, there's one fee that was kind of an outlier in my estimation, right? Like I'm not using that statistically, but was higher, but it seemed to account for additional risks, right? As compared to some of the other fees. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that factored into your thinking and kind of coming, or how it factors into your thinking?
Yeah, and I might ask Bridget to also elevate herself as the author of the paper. And Julie, if you could clarify a little bit, when you're talking about the higher range of the fee, what specific part are you referring to?
Sorry, I'll find it. The different fees that were discussed in the white paper, and I can't remember who had it, but somebody had what felt like a much higher fee to me. And I'll try to pull it up, but my recollection is that it accounted for different risks. And so as we as a body are looking at setting fees, I'm trying to understand what risks we should be considering, right? And this kind of follows some of the conversation in the KOGA comment letter. And, I noted, both of the comment letters focus on kind of an 8 cent per ton. And just kind of collectively, a generalized response from staff would be great. And I know that that's not a very precise question. And so, Bridget, if you want to jump in, great.
Take the first one, Director Murphy. Thank you. And I believe you're referring to the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
And the state of Louisiana has much higher fees and storage fees than any other state that has contemplated or even instituted this type of fund. And I would say it's really determined and driven by the amount of activity as well as the amount of risks that exist in the state of Louisiana, which I think are more than what we have here in Colorado. It's just as far as the number of well penetrations and activity around. And so that is one of the main drivers. But I see that Bridget has also elevated herself and would like to supplement my comments. Feel free.
I'll also add that in speaking with staff from the department in Louisiana, they're they're in the process of revamping their fee structure. They recognize that it's very complex to operators and for them to even explain to us as fellow subject matter experts. And so all that to say, they're in the process of revisiting it, and it may look different in the coming years.
And Ms. Huntley, if I could jump in, the other states that you guys informed us about do more of kind of a direct job with the fee without the equivalent other financial mechanisms. Is Louisiana's reconsideration a result of their potentially agreeing that just sort of the straight fee approach makes more sense? Or do you know?
That wasn't discussed, and Mike actually just brought up a good point that their fee encompasses much more than long-term stewardship. I'm trying to reacquaint myself with exactly their details, but it's also a permitting fee, and so it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, up to I think 5 million per facility and 10 million per operator for the life of the well. So I don't know the direct answer to your question. We can certainly follow up with them.
And just to inform folks that are listening in, the recommendation from you guys to us is to do the more straightforward per ton fee approach. And I think your recommendation was 8 cents to 12 cents per ton. So just to kind of lay it out there, that's the recommendation we received. And did I get that right, Mr. Seeley and Ms. Huntley?
Yes, and that's actually in statute that it has to be a per ton fee, and we don't have much flexibility to change that structure.
All right, appreciate that point. Board Member Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had a follow-up question. It sounds like it'd be good to kind of get an understanding of why Louisiana is thinking about changing this and how. Do we have a sense of the other states, Wyoming and North Dakota, if they're still very happy with how they had structured this, or if they have also contemplated any potential adjustments that we should be thinking about so we can kind of be aligning to where people are headed, or I don't know how recently they had kind of updated these procedures and if their thinking was still representative and applicable. Thank you.
Ms. Huntley.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. The fees were implemented very recently for both of those states. So for Wyoming, they did not cite any issues when talking to them about a need for a higher fee. For North Dakota, they've had their fee in place for the longest time, and their first reevaluation cycle where they've had revenue coming in from their fee is set to be this year. They will be writing a letter to their state legislature. That's part of their mandate to discuss whether it's at an appropriate level to fund long-term stewardship. So we'll know more this year.
And I
Thank
think
you.
all of this, not to change our approach, but I think a lot of this is also going to get to the third point that we need to think about today, which is cadence and board meetings and fee adjustments and all of that. So I just kind of throw that out there for the board's thought process as well. Do we have other questions of our subject matter experts? Commissioner or Board Member Murphy?
Thank you. My other question really stems from Koga's comment letter in particular. And it seemed to me that I would benefit from staff responding to kind of how they read those comments as it relates to the white paper. I'm not asking for white paper changes. I don't think that's necessary, but I think helping articulate, either in a Gantt chart, are these different phases of timings? Are they discrete? And kind of just walking through what you think the process looks like as I articulated in ECMC's rules from the start of a project until this fee would come into play and what the different parameters are. And I'm sorry for a complex question. I should have probably asked for a graphic to be very candid, but here we are. I know you'll do the best you can.
That's totally fine, Director Murphy, and thanks for the question. We do want to appreciate the comments that we received from Carbon Storage Solutions and Koga, essentially in 4 themes. The first theme, I think, is the easiest to address, and that is both kind of recommending that the board does not put into a place a orphan well stewardship fee, if you will, and the white paper recommended against implementing that right now. We don't have a lot of projects in the state to base that off of, and then throughout the country, we have not seen any orphan sites or any leading indicators of any orphan sites. And so I think we're in line with those comments of being prudent in that area and not instituting a fee at this time. The other comments were around the fee rate from 8 to 12 cents. Both comments recommended 8 cents on the lower end of the range. I think within the range of 8 to 12 cents is where we recommended. So again, it's up for the board to discuss. And I think considerations are, project size, so the amount of volume being sequestered. The first couple of projects that are slated to have injection operations are very low volume compared to other projects nationwide, with the thinking that low volume projects probably create lower subsurface risk, and so therefore could maybe lead towards having a lower fee. But again, there are other factors as well based upon where the site is located. Volume might not be the driving factor. It could be a subsurface kind of geologic risk associated with that site. So those are additional considerations. And then there was definitely some conversation around, as you mentioned, Director Murphy, the timing of PISC from long-term stewardship. And we are in concurrence wholeheartedly with Koga's comments that the post-injection site care. So once injection operations have ceased, it's a multi-decade long monitoring period that the operator will do. This is operator-led, and at the same time, there are financial instruments that the operator will have in place with the state to cover any future remediation risks that are necessary. And so that portion of the end of life of a project is still financially secure, if you will, because we will have financial assurance instruments that we could leverage should there be an event. Once site closure occurs, again, the site has been deemed safe, the subsurface plume has been deemed no longer a risk to USDWs, public health, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and there should not be any future remediation work that needs to occur. That's why we as an agency will release the operator from regulatory liability as well as release the operator from those financial assurance instruments that they had in place throughout the life of their project. The long-term stewardship comes into play really for the low frequency monitoring that we expect to occur over the duration of storage, in which it should be in perpetuity. And so in order to validate that the site is still secure, there needs to be some low frequency event of monitoring to validate that. And then the other avenue, which Koga mentioned, which we are in agreement with, is it really will only involve kind of event level remediation work in the future, of which, again, that risk should be extremely low to non-existent based upon just the regulatory process that we have in place. I'll also comment that long-term stewardship is defined as the monitoring and integrity maintenance of geologic storage facilities. And so monitoring being in the definition, again, that's a part of just the long-term stewardship to validate that the project is safe and secure. And so definitely want to create that the post-injection site care and site closure is the official kind of end of Class 6 regulations, of which then financial assurance covers everything from the beginning all the way to the end. But once we hit long-term stewardship and that operator is released from kind of future liability, that's when these funds take over, kind of that long-term safety net to validate that the project is secure and stable.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you for helping kind of chart that out. And then kind of honing in on this like monitoring discussion, which to me, in the work that I've done, for ECMC, there's monitoring can mean lots of different things. It can be lots of really expensive wells, right? It could also be being attentive to what may come. And to me, it seems that when the agency has released the site, right, we have done a lot of monitoring to affirm that the things you've identified are not occurring, right? And we think that it's stable and safe. And those aren't the perfect words to use, but they're the ones that come to mind now, such that I wouldn't envision that this board would come in and immediately start some sort of rigorous monitoring around that plume, right? We would be more responsive if something were to arise, and then we may institute some sort of monitoring. Is that kind of a fair way to think about different types of monitoring in these different scenarios?
I think so, yes, because again, that site is going to be monitored for several decades before site closure is authorized. It should be very clear and transparent what the current risks are with that closed site. And you are correct. It should be more event-driven testing, or if there is no event, then it's multi-decade kind of time span in between some form of monitoring just to validate that the storage complex is still in the current state of where it was left.
That's terrific. And thank you, board members, for bearing with me as I ask some questions and wandered around a little bit.
No, it's very helpful. Board Member Ross, and then after that, Board Member Randall.
If I may ask Board Member Murphy a question, actually, taking advantage of the fact that we had phenomenal Colorado representation on the White House CEQ CCUS permitting task force. I had to give up my seat when I took my DOE job. So Julie, you kind of experienced more of the tail end of that task force. Are there any recommendations coming out of that task force that kind of would influence these later stages of the project that we should be thinking about right now?
Board member, that is a terrific question and one that I'm woefully unprepared to answer. As things have been evolving yet in that space, I haven't checked back on where the recommendations are, and they are at this point still unfinalized. So what I would love to do is put a pin in that, and maybe once that the work of that task force is finalized, it's something that we can update the board on, either in writing, probably in writing. But great question.
Board Member Randall.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. I wanted to follow up on the exchange between Board Member Murphy and Mr. Seeley about monitoring. And so I guess I'll phrase this first as a question to Mr. Seeley, but then I'll also maybe put a pin in it as something I'd like to discuss with the board members when we get there. And that is just, as I read the white paper, it anticipates, and I don't want to pull a single sentence out of context, but in the context of, but in discussing how the funds in the stewardship fund would be used, it contemplates that monitoring will likely be the largest ongoing cost of the long-term stewardship phase. That's at the bottom of page 12. COGA takes issue with that and, talks about how monitoring shouldn't be envisioned as an ongoing cost, but rather that the fund should be used for what they characterize as low probability, high consequence remediation, which to me goes to something far more than monitoring, but rather trying to fix a problem that has been identified and that has occurred, by their use of the word remediation. And so I guess there seems to be some disagreement about what the fund is likely to be most used for. And the reason I'm asking isn't just to sort of pit one against the other, but rather to try to figure out what we should plan for in setting the fee. So I guess that's a lot of wind up, Mr. Seeley, but I guess I'm wondering if you've got any response to COGA's sort of comments about the fund being used for remediation versus the white paper statement that it would be mostly used for monitoring.
I appreciate that. And I would say that monitoring in my view is the best case scenario for the funds to be used for, because over time, when the site is monitored and it's verified that the storage is still intact, there's no future risk, the risk profile, I should say, remains the same, then that's the definition of a perfect project that we and the operator created, is finding a safe, secure location and then just validating that it is still secure and monitoring over time, I think, is the win-win situation that we have. I do agree that there could be the need for remediation of some type if there was an event to occur. We view that risk as extremely low. Otherwise, I hope that we're not issuing site closure if that risk still exists. But I think that there always is a risk for some subsurface geologic event to occur on a greater scale that could impact it. But again, I feel like that consideration should be low, as well as considering the size, as we talked about earlier, a volume of a project. A lower volume project in a suitable geological location should inherently be lower risk than potentially a higher volume project. But again, if projects are in a suitable geologic location, then volume shouldn't matter. It's just about the storage complex and how quality it is. And again, I just think monitoring is the best outcome that we expect to see. And so I think that's where the majority of the funds will be spent.
Could I ask a brief follow-up? And that is just, what is the nature of the remediation that, should monitoring identify, as COGA calls it, a low probability, high consequence circumstance? What would the remediation look like? Would it be drilling wells and cement? Would it be, I mean, I'm just kind of, as a practical matter, what is the sort of work that it might result?
I think it could be very broad. So I can give some examples, but I think there are many others, among others, that could be included. But I think well integrity, the injection well integrity, whether that's a product material that was used over time, it degrades and has a corrosive effect, and something happens, and so there's a potential leak within the injection well, and so it would involve remediation of that injection well. Likewise, it could be if there was a monitor well that went through the plume, that could also be kind of a well remediation. I think those would be along the higher ends. And I know that there's a couple other of my staff that has some thoughts as well that they would like to add. Chair, is it appropriate to elevate some of them now to have them comment as well?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Mr.
Energy
Boudreau,
Manager Thomas, if you could help us elevate some folks, that'd be great. I also see that Mr. Rigby has his hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I wanted to comment on some of these questions, and apologies for not being on camera. My computer wants to update and won't let me use it until I do so. So,
Mr. Rigby, if you could tell us who you are so that everybody understands, that'd be great.
sure, I'm Energy Transition Senior Scientist at ECMC and have been working on Class 6 for a few years for the agency, setting up the program here.
Thanks.
Just to comment briefly on the monitoring strategies and technologies are kind of drastically evolving right now for Class 6. There's like a lot of different monitoring strategies coming up. Some are very expensive, some are not so expensive. To get to while you're actively injecting, you're going to be using expensive monitoring strategies to really understand how the plume's acting. As you stop injecting through post-injection site care, monitoring will likely, the amount you spend on monitoring, the amount you do is going to kind of reduce with risk over time all the way to site closure. So I agree with what Mr. Seeley said, as well as what Koga kind of indicated, that monitoring is not going to be extensive in long-term stewardship. I do think that at times there could very well be rationale to do some monitoring. There could be instances where maybe nearby development is occurring of some other kind, and you just want to ensure that where the plume's at. There's a lot of other variables that could pop up over 50 years. So allowing the board at that time and staff to make recommendations is what we think is prudent. As well as there could be many monitoring strategies that would be quite affordable at that time that have been developed over the main period of CCS occurring that we're kind of jumping into right now as the United States. So just wanted to flag all of that as part of this conversation, that while it would be very reduced, there could be situations where monitoring would be prudent. And then that monitoring would also could indicate, and why monitoring is done, is if there is a bigger issue that needs remediation. And monitoring can, if caught early, make remediation much lower. So there's going to be a balance of how the board in the future and staff in the future kind of work together to decide how these funds are used prudently and effectively to reduce risk, but also not spend all your money on monitoring when it's not necessary. So thanks.
Thank you.
Board Member Littlefield.
You're muted, Anna.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry. I was just going to kind of jump into that conversation that Board Member Randall brought up as well, because you were asking about like what kind of failures, and at least I tend to think of them as either mechanical or operational or geologic failure. That's kind of the two categories in which I would put them. And the language about what was it that Koga said, low probability, high consequence, I would put that in the geologic failure category. That's how I would describe that. There's really not a lot of I think that is extremely low probability, but that is not something that you can go in and fix really quickly with, remediate. You have to just focus on remediating the environmental consequences of what's happened. Whereas a mechanical failure, like wellbore maintenance, that's much easier to address. That is something that you can, actually spend dollars on and fix: cement jobs, casing failures, etc. That being said, I agree with Mike Rigby that I don't think we should say explicitly no monitoring as part of the, long-term stewardship fees usage, because you don't know. I mean, as somebody who looks at water data professionally, you see these like spurts of data acquisition, and it's like 6 months of they sampled every week, and then it's, not again for 10 years. And it's always because a problem was suspected, or new development is happening, or somebody complains and they have to prove that, there isn't mercury in the water, or whatever the case may be. So without monitoring, I mean, you don't know that you have a problem. You also don't know that you fixed a problem. Testing and monitoring is really the only way that you can verify the delta between what was and what is, or confirm that there isn't an issue. And this is probably going to be, soil, gas, water monitoring, et cetera. It's not going to be deep geologic monitoring at this point in the project, at least.
Emphasize that I appreciate the subject matter experts on the board. Ms. Ross, board member Ross.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for all of this really excellent discussion, including with staff and your willingness to engage in this really, really excellent dialogue. I recall that it was specifically stated that we are allowed to purchase insurance as a board, and that would be an appropriate use of our fees, if I recall correctly. So I wanted to understand what staff's understanding is of kind of the insurance that would cover some of these low probability, high consequence events. And thus we should be thinking about the insurance cost to cover those events as opposed to the actual capital. Thank you.
Who from staff would like to comment?
I could take a first stab at this one. I think this is, and maybe Mark Seeley can add on. I think insurance and CCS and risk associated with it is a very evolving industry, and how those insurance plans are being sculpted is very much in flux and developing and very project specific. So this is another item I would say we would have more data over time on. It's also not something unless you're an operator. So as like a state agency, we don't necessarily have access to insurance documents, especially as one who's not a primacy authority yet. So we have not explicitly reviewed insurance documents other than what's been released publicly on other projects. I have been part of conversations talking about this topic, but that's kind of where I'm at now. It's very developing, and understanding how insurance plays a role in these projects, both during the operation and then after, is something we need to monitor, in my opinion. And Mark, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Rigby. I think the thinking was for potentially larger remediation events that it would be or could be prudent for the long-term stewardship fee to pay a premium to cover a higher insurance amount, or could unlock a future dollar amount that's greater than what has been contributed. Again, just to potentially cover a greater event than what industry is currently contemplating or thinking could occur. Again, kind of the 100-year flood type of events that could be there. And it just might be prudent to investigate and to look at that as a way to leverage the dollars that applicants or operators will be contributing to the fund.
Further follow-up on this line of inquiry from board members?
Thank you.
Further questions for staff? Sorry, my monitor is off as well. I'm having difficulties with my internet, but I can see all of you and hear you. So with that, I believe we have had a good hearty discussion, and now we need to think about deliberating on the geologic stewardship fee and the amount that we are thinking about. We can also interweave in this a discussion around cadence of revisiting fees, because I think the two are kind of tied together a little bit. We're kind of I think it's self-evident that we're kind of early on in the stage of the geologic stewardship issues within the state, and that may or may not influence the thoughts around, when we want to revisit this. And I'll go ahead and just sort of like throw some ideas out there. I think number one, the board ought to meet yearly. I think if we don't meet, like if we don't see each other for 3 years, we may forget about each other or forget about the important work that we're trying to do. I think yearly makes some sense. I also am not necessarily advocating that we revisit the fee each year, but rather we get together, we chat with staff, we get a sense of the nuance of the development in this area. And then we could make a determination of whether fees need to be revisited or not. I think a longer sort of one of the statutes points to us is that we also need to provide predictability for operators. And so that I think means that adjusting fees yearly or every 6 months doesn't satisfy that component of the statute. I think more along the lines of, multiple years, maybe three, for actual revisitation of fees might make some sense. And so I just throw those thoughts out there as just one commissioner or one board member, sorry. As we think about what that initial fee ought to be. So maybe if we wanted to have other board members think about cadence and revisiting our things right now, that might help influence where the initial fee may need to be. So I throw it out there for my fellow board members to throw out their thoughts. Commissioner Ross or Board Member Ross?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree that that we need to provide the reasonable balance of predictability, but making sure that we're staying on top of what's going on with the industry. And so I would agree with a 3-year reevaluation cadence for the fee, with at a minimum an annual meeting, as you said, to kind of get a sense from staff, from the industry. And I would posit even, and this may be me that, I like information and I like to be really kind of up to speed with what's going on. Like I would actually value meeting every 6 months as a board for, some of these early, maybe for the first 3-year period. Again, not with planning to reevaluate the fee at those meetings. And one thing I discussed with some of the staff in prep for this meeting was the idea that I also want to make sure that there's some sort of mechanism for people to feed us information, whether that's, the insurance industry wants to make sure that we know what they're offering or, what's going on in other states. And so, making sure that we've got, in addition to meeting ourselves and having our huddles, potentially we could use the alternative 6-month meeting as an opportunity for people to submit more comments or present to us. And we could always, cancel meetings if unwarranted. So in summary, I would agree with a 3-year fee reevaluation cadence and a 6-month or annual board meeting.
Thanks for those comments. Others with thoughts? Commissioner Rand or Board Member Randall? Sorry, I deal with commissions all the time. So it's a weird adjustment for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Board Member Ross's suggestion as to both a meeting cadence where we can just check in with one another. Again, with a virtual meeting, that's pretty simple to do. So maybe it is every 6 months. I think that would provide an important opportunity for staff to both provide information to the board, for the board to sort of ask questions, to report on what we are seeing or hearing in the field. We were appointed due to our experience and expertise, so we might have information to bring to bear. So I think that's a good suggestion. As to the reevaluation of the fee, I agree with the recommendation in the white paper of an initial reevaluation at kind of the 3-year mark, and then possibly looking at a reevaluation beyond that at a different interval. Maybe it's 5 years, but we could determine that later. It's my understanding, and I guess maybe I'll just, and this might be a question for Mr. Boudreau, but if assuming the board sets a fee today, say, and were to change that fee in 3 years, again, making lots of assumptions here. But if we were to do that, the fee that an operator would pay if they were in business doing injection in that first 3-year period would be, the fee that's set today, and then they wouldn't be they wouldn't be subject to a higher fee if it were reevaluated at the 3-year mark for injection that's already occurred, but that would be the fee for injection going forward from that point. So the fee that they pay would change as the fee is changed for ongoing activities. Mr. Boudreau, do you have a sense? Am I right about that? That again, the fee paid would evolve as the fee changes by the board?
Thank you, Board Member Miranda. I think generally, yes. As a general principle of law, retroactive application of new standards is generally disfavored. But certainly, if you were to reevaluate the fee in 3 years, and in the motion when you reevaluate it, you indicate, even though an operator may be currently injecting at, say, X cents per ton, that's not sort of grandfathered in moving forward, and that from now on you'll be doing Y cents per ton. I think that'd be sufficient in the motion to put everyone on notice that moving forward it'll be Y cents per ton. But retroactively is generally disfavored.
Great. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Good clarifying question. Appreciate that. Others with thoughts? Board Member Ross.
I actually had that triggered another question in my mind, which is that if we were to end up with any strange surprises in the world of CCS, to what extent might we need to be working in whatever we have to do, working it into this fee, whereas we could establish this fee, and if something new, something weird happened that became an additional onus on CCS operators, could that be addressed as something different and independent at the time? And I guess will everything have to wrap up into this, or is there a possibility that there could be additional fees in the future layered on if needed?
So I'd say in terms of whether to impose additional fees, your only option there, as far as I can tell, under 346144 would be the option to impose an additional fee for orphan geologic storage facilities. There are certain legal requirements that are certain legal findings you would need to find, certain findings you would need to arrive at to impose that fee. To get to the first part of the question, make sure I understand it. So, obviously staff has identified monitoring and potential remediation as things that could be reasonably expected future expenditures for the fund. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you're asking is if there's something else that comes up that the board would need to address, can you basically adjust the per ton stewardship fee to account for that? Is that right?
And thinking about a scenario, and this may be the only scenario I can think of, but where some incident happens somewhere and all of a sudden the cost for insurance goes, sky high, or there's an additional insurance product developed for the CCS world that was beyond what we were contemplating when we set this first fee.
So my analysis of that would be, if you identify some expenditure that the fund is likely to need to cover in the future that isn't currently being contemplated today, I think you would be able to adjust the fee to account for that. So your fee needs to be set to basically anticipate reasonable future expenditures for long-term stewardship. And the statute at 346144(2)(e) defines long-term stewardship as including any action necessary to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, or wildlife resources, in addition to monitoring and remediation. Monitoring and integrity maintenance. So I think if you identify something outside of monitoring and integrity maintenance in the future that has the potential to impact public health, safety, welfare, the environment, or wildlife resources, then I think you can adjust the fee to account for that extra reasonably anticipated future expenditure.
Thank you. Appreciate that complex and elaborate and well done response.
Yeah, apologies for that. Just want to get the language right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Board Member Murphy.
Thanks all. And kind of it's an interesting segue to think about the issues and questions that board member Ross raised. And for me, as you know, kind of sitting in a dual role as director of the organization that would regulate the entities actually performing the injection, right? And I think that those types of occurrences would not be left solely to this board to manage, right? There would also be a regulatory component, I anticipate. And so for me, kind of making sure we're thinking, I hear that and think in both sides of my brains on it, right? Like what does the board need to do, and also what would the commission itself do on the regulatory side to ameliorate the risk on the front end while you still have live operators. And so I think it's thought provoking, and to me underscores a couple of things. I want to echo something that I heard board member Littlefield articulate, which is the difference between the mechanical risk and the geologic risk. And when I think about the role of this board, I think that our role is more about managing geologic risk, which implies to me also geologic timescales, more so than like the injection side, which is still unbalanced at this point in time, an industry that is moving strategically and not in Colorado at the same pace that I'm seeing, upstream oil and gas development. And so comparing those two things for me is important as I'm thinking about what is the right cadence. Because I love human beings and I love connecting with them. I love the idea of connecting every 6 months, and maybe we could have other states that are working on this issue come and talk to us, maybe leadership from Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, trade groups, to kind of get a state of the industry, right? So I think that's a tremendous idea, and I would ask staff to be thoughtful in working on it to help us keep kind of on this cutting edge as it's evolving, even if it's not evolving every 2 weeks, right? So those are my kind of thoughts on cadence. I think that every 6 months to a year for the first few years as we're finding our feet make a lot of sense to me. I think revisiting our fees every 3 to 5 years is about right. Again, if for some reason we saw wild activity, we might want to adjust that a little bit. But at this point in time, again, it's a very, I think, strategic measured deployment in Colorado. And in fact, we don't yet have primacy from EPA. So I think that this first window of time, again, I'm kind of in the 3 to 5 year range. And then on the third point, I think the 8 cents per ton makes sense to me. I can't recall if other folks have articulated it, but based on looking at the fees across the nation, our commitment to revisit it in, somewhere around 3 years, it sounds like, if I'm hearing my other board members correctly, and looking at the pace and state of permits in Colorado, that's about what makes sense to me. So long-winded, 3 different topics all mashed together, and happy to discuss further.
Love it. Mash away. Board Member Littlefield.
I was just going to say that I agree with board member Murphy about 8 cents per ton. And also I love board member Ross's suggestion about bringing in folks to speak to us and make sure that we're informed at an every 6 month cadence. I was going to ask, just for clarification, I know that the positions on this board have different terms. Am I correct in that, Chairman?
Yeah. So as with most boards that are statutorily created, they stagger the first terms to ensure that we don't have like kind of a wholesale loss of expertise. Having said that, we serve at the pleasure of the governor and the Senate confirmation. And I would encourage board members, if they're enjoying their jobs, to reapply. Like there's nothing that prohibits a second or third continuous involvement with this board. So, while, and I don't remember who's got the 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year terms, but I would encourage us to continue to try to play together in our sandpit, because I think, I think this meeting has done a fantastic job of establishing that we did a great job of finding really good subject matter experts for this board.
Okay, I was asking because I wanted to make sure that the timeframes we were going to be meeting and kind of jived with when we would be gone. But that's good to hear that you can serve consecutively. And yeah, I think that may be something to keep in mind with the timelines of revisiting, if it's always going to be, if we set a 3 year or 4 year, revisit the fee, then is immediately after new board members take their seats. And would that be wise? Just something to
It's a
think
good
about.
point. And I think it, again, to the extent that folks are comfortable with the service they're providing the state, to continue or to reapply it would be helpful. Board Member Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The lawyer and former policymaker in me makes me want to sort of clarify the reasoning behind my statement that I supported a 3-year cadence for reevaluation of the fee. And it's not just based on the recommendation of the staff, though there's certainly that. But I think that the discussion we've had about the evolution of technology, the ability to learn from projects in Colorado or in other states, just kind of the need to consider new information because it can really affect what the fee should be in the board's view. I think warrants reevaluating the fee every 3 years. So I just wanted to be a little more explicit as to my reasoning for my support for that concept. Again, I think it's just it's based on the circumstances, and again, the board would have the ability to reconsider that interval at a future meeting as we learn more, and it might not be necessary to revisit it every 3 years. But I think initially that makes sense for all the reasons that we've been discussing.
Others with thoughts? All right. Board Member Murphy, I'm going to put you on the spot. You mashed all this together, so mash away a motion for us, unless others have comments, thoughts, etc.
I will try, and I can't wait to let AAG Boudreaux polish what I'm about to articulate. So I would move that this board plan to meet every 6 months or at a minimum annually for the next 3 years. And that the board set the initial storage fee at 8 cents per ton, and that the board plan to revisit with appropriate, public process that fee in 2029, calendar year 2029. Ben, how do you want to, sorry, AG Boudreaux, what do you think?
Yes, if you want, I can reword it a little bit. Is that okay?
Terrific.
Okay. So based on commissioner deliberations regarding setting the fee amount, periodic reevaluation, and the cadence of a regular meeting schedule, I would recommend a motion to set the stewardship fee at 8 cents for each ton of injection carbon dioxide that a geologic storage operator injects in Colorado, and that the motion also include the reevaluation of the stewardship fee 3 years from now in 2029, while reserving for the board the right to adjust the fee at an earlier date if the board determines that the reasonably anticipated future expenditures of the fund have changed before the 3rd year. And also that the motion include that the board will meet every 6 months to receive information from stakeholders, other states, and those whose staff recommends might have information to provide, and also open those 6-month meetings up to public comment.
Ditto? Or so moved? What do you prefer?
I think ditto is wonderful. So moved is probably even better. I like your motion, Board Member Murphy, but I like AG Boudreaux's motion a little bit better. It looks like he put some time and effort into it ahead of time. So we have a motion before us. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. We have at least one other piece of duty before us, and that is the concept of whether the board believes we need to establish a fee for orphaned geologic storage facilities. I can start. I believe that We've heard from staff that that's not necessary at this point in time for a number of reasons. I tend to agree with that. Do other board members have thoughts about an orphaned geologic storage facility fee? Board Member Ross.
I concur that it does not seem necessary or warranted at this time. And I think it's important to demonstrate to stakeholders, the fact that we've got a regulatory system that, precludes this orphan well issue.
Others with thoughts? Board Member Randall.
I'll just share that I agree. That's my sense as well. And looking at the findings that would be required in the statute to do so, I think that would be premature on the record that we have before us. So that's my view.
Board Member Murphy or Board Member Littlefield, other thoughts?
I would say I agree. I think it's something that maybe could be revisited in the future if we have enough activity to warrant that it becomes, it seems a potential risk. I think that'd be a great, I think that would be a really exciting development if we had enough projects that it was actually something that we were concerned about, because there was so much CCS activity in the state of Colorado. But right now it seems like we're in a bit of a wait and see phase for now.
Chair, I'll stick with ditto.
Ditto. All right. Two dittos in one meeting. You win that award. AAG Bedreau, just a quick question. Do we need to affirmatively move to not set an orphan well fee, or is the record sufficiently stated that all five of us agree that at this point it's premature and we don't want to set one?
I'd say in the statute, there's no requirement that you do a motion. It might be cleaner to make a final decision that the board members have considered whether or not to impose one and decided not to at this time, but reserve the right to revisit this in the future.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Is there further duties before us today? That's a question for the AAG and or my fellow commissioners.
I have nothing else for you, Chairman Robbins. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's great seeing everybody. We'll see everybody in 6 months. Commissioner or Board Member Ross.
Should we, or how should we best coordinate to plan for that meeting 6 months from now in terms of soliciting input from, states or other agencies? Or we just, as board members, will sit and wait, or let us know if there's anything more we can do about that?
Good question. Board Member Littlefield, do you have your hand up as well?
I was just going to ask for now, since this is a public meeting and we've officially voted, are we allowed to talk about it now to other outside parties about the fee?
AAG Bedreau?
Yes, you can discuss the fee with others and your work on the board. My only caveat would be that the board members themselves cannot meet to discuss board business outside of public hearings pursuant to open meetings law.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And then I think there's a question about how to get information before the board.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Seeley's raised his hand. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Robbins. I was going to say we will schedule future meetings with each board member as that 6-month date approaches. At that time, we can make recommendations of trade groups or individuals that we would want to bring in to talk to the board. We also welcome suggestions and thoughts from board members of folks that they would like us to bring in. And I think we can coordinate and plan for what that meeting in 6 months looks like as we get a little bit closer.
Board Member Murphy, my brain is thinking about wondering if that might be a good time to kind of get a readout from the White House Task Force, CCUS permitting group. And that about 6 months, maybe that might be about right.
I hope so. And, I think that I would also encourage board members, if you know of folks who want to participate or who would want to come forward, to connect them with Mr. Seeley. I think I would I'm now thinking through it. I mean, there's a ton of good stuff and a lot of states working hard on this, and it could be a really interesting morning discussion, especially if we don't have decision making before us, right?
And Board Member Murphy, I just wanted to highlight, you used a phrase earlier about kind of keeping us on the leading edge. We're kind of, on the cusp of CCS. And I love the idea of this group being very much at the leading edge of the CCS industry. And right, we might be, later than some of these other states setting these fees, but I'd love for us to stay, on the leading edge and show the rest of the states how to do it.
Agreed. All right. I believe that concludes our business for today. Thank you very much to my fellow board members for your participating in this important endeavor for the state of Colorado. This has been a really good first meeting. We'll see each other in 6 months. And with that, I would move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right. See you guys in 6 months.
Thanks so much.
Thank
And thanks,
Thank
staff.
you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
staff.